Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think it's time that we speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss how they've overcome any challenges they faced in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. So whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. And today I'm very excited to be joined by Vanessa Chikaka, who's a qualified competition lawyer, and she's going to be talking to us about how we can actually foster transparency, and growth within the legal sector. So thank you so much for joining me today, Vanessa.
Hi, Claire. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very excited.
Great. I thought maybe as an introduction to yourself, it would be really interesting to hear about your journey into the legal sector and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for the intro. I actually qualified in the UK, but I am from Germany. So went to, German gymnasium, those that, are familiar with it. And I came to the UK in 2011. That's when I started my LLB. Then I went on to do an LLM and got a training contract. And it was very interesting because I didn't do my LLB at a Russell's Group University. So I just went to the University of Kent, brilliant university. But, there's and I didn't know this because I came from Germany and there wasn't really an understanding of which universities get training contracts. So I then decided to do my master's at King's College, so to increase my chances a little bit. And I was I'm very fortunate to then get a training contract with O'Melveny and Myers, a US law firm with a small intake, which was brilliant and absolutely loved it. The reason for getting into law was, and also studying in the UK, I don't know, I had this very dreamy image of the UK, the gentleman culture. It's very funny if you think about it.
Yeah.
I also thought of the Commonwealth, just having a lot more opportunities to studying the English law rather than just the German law. German is very, it's very much focused on Germany, whereas the English law, you could go to Nigeria, which is also my background.
That's amazing. I think it's always interesting when, whenever I think back, and it's often through having these conversations, I think back about my career path and how it was shaped and these whimsical ideas I had as to why I ended up where I am. Even I ended up with Slaughter and May, and I was determined I was going to move to London, having no idea about the reality of working in a London, corporate law firm and all of these things. So I think it's so interesting when you start to kind of look back and think about why you made those decisions.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many times I think, what was I thinking? Especially with, I think there's quite a romantic image of the law in the UK and of the legal industry. And I think a lot of it is, true. And, you have a very attractive, working late culture, and that can be fun and exciting. Yeah. But, sometimes I think when you find yourself doing those long hours, you think to yourself, what happened?
Yeah,
what
it's
happened?
Not like it is on Suits.
No.
I can never watch those kind of legal programs, because I think once you've been in it, it's quite infuriating seeing how it's portrayed versus what
it's a lie. Yeah, for sure.
And in terms of where you're at now, so what are you doing with yourself now?
Yeah, so I then, after I did my training contract, I did a very exciting, weird thing. I actually jumped from O'Melveny during my last seat already to Fried Frank. So I finished my training at Fried Frank, which is very unconventional actually in the UK. So I had to contact the Law Society and they had to, approve that. And the reason for doing that is because I always knew I wanted to do competition law, and I got an offer from Fried Frank to do competition law there. And then I was a competition lawyer for 2 years, and I just recently decided to take my passion a bit more serious on a full-time basis, and I'm now helping law firms with diversity strategy and recruitment.
Amazing. And you're actually the first person, other than myself, to be on the podcast who isn't currently practicing as a lawyer. So it was very exciting to have you on. And when I did speak to you, I was like, yes, I can't wait to hear a little bit more around about what you're doing. So thank you again for joining me. when we kind of spoke initially, before recording this session,
Mm.
we spoke a little bit like about our journeys into the legal sector. And one thing that was very apparent that both of us faced was this kind of real strong imposter syndrome. And I wondered if you'd be happy to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So because I do quite a lot of, coaching right now on imposter, the reason for doing that is because as a woman of color, I think there is even a bigger issue and challenge with the fact that you don't have people who look like you within, big multinational and cross-country organizations. So when you walk into a situation and you think, wow, there's actually no one that looks like me who has done it before, why am I the person who, who could do it or who should do it? So this feeling of inadequacy, despite evident results, is very, very strong, specifically for people from a diverse background. And I think, it is, even now when I speak, and I'm sure Claire, we spoke about this, every trainee faces this, right? Every not only trainee, associates, we still face this when we walk into a situation, and it's unfamiliar. But the funny thing about imposter syndrome, which we need to really internalize, it's not a lack of confidence, it's actually a lack of self-belief, because it's a lack of accepting the success that you already had. Right? The evidence.
Wow, that's just blown my mind a little bit. I'm like, so true. I'm going to write that down.
It's so interesting, because sometimes we focus so much, I need to be more confident, but that doesn't really address imposter. Imposter can happen to partners in law firms.
It does. They've told me about it numerous times on this podcast.
There you go.
People who are literally chief executives of law firms have told me that they suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. And when you then say, oh, they don't have confidence, that doesn't make sense. But when you break it down to they are not in acceptance or in belief of their results that have got them there, that makes more sense. So it's really addressing that and understanding that, because that helps you to work on self-belief. That's what it will overcome imposter syndrome, I've found.
Yeah, and I suppose that ties in as well, and this is something I always really struggled with within the legal sector, and almost coming from a different angle from you, because although I looked, being a white female, I kind of looked like the people around me to a certain extent. But what was very different for me was that the background I came from, I wasn't privately educated. I hadn't gone to a Russell Group university. And I didn't realize before I entered Slaughter May that was something different. And there was definitely, there was a diverse group of people who were in my cohort and in my intake. But I often felt like I just didn't know the words to use, or they'd be speaking about their kind of education, and it was so far removed from mine. Like, I went to a school where we didn't even have a school uniform. It was a really good school, but it was so different from everyone else's experience that left me kind of looking at how can I actually bring myself to the table, my personality to the table, so I'm comfortable in myself, but also I'm looking at everyone else around me and looking at how professional they are, and I need to act like them to be a professional lawyer. So for me, that was something I really struggled with. And I don't know if that was confidence or I suppose it was self-belief as well, right?
Yeah, I think it was both, right? But it starts with, I always say everything starts with identity. Knowing who you are and that you are meant to be there is the beginning of all wisdom, and is the beginning of your career journey. Because Claire, I actually believe that, ethnic minority is in a marriage with class, right? You cannot separate class, what you spoke about, the background of universities, etc., from ethnic minority representation. It goes hand in hand. So what you just described, I can put my hand up and say, absolutely, I felt that, right?
A higher level, as well, because you had that additional.
Yeah, I guess so. And I think it's very difficult. And I think this is also something that we try to do now, is just really educating the legal sector, about the importance of these mastery of self skills, right? Despite race, let's leave race out of it for a second. Despite if you are from a Black background or from a white background or from, whatever, the importance of knowing who you are will give you and enable you to go much further than those that don't, because you wouldn't be dependent on others putting value on you, right? That is that link that happens. If we start believing I'm only good if someone tells me I'm good, or I only fit in when I start speaking the language and go golfing and, you know, go to the pub after 5. If I start believing that, then I'm limiting my own abilities and I will not be able to perform to my highest potential. And it has to start there, that we start educating in the legal industry that being yourself and being you is what makes this firm better. Better. I think that's where we have to start.
And I think it's difficult as well, isn't it? And it's just phenomenal. I think for me especially, you know, it took me a long time to feel comfortable being myself. And even like when I first started, because I've worked from home for quite a long time, and when I was like doing webinars, I would like face this really jaunty angle so that my background was just like this plain white background, so nobody would have any insight. Like even like wearing a jumper that's not black, like it was quite like I would just do these things so that I fitted in. But I actually realized when I was doing that, I was kind of stilting what I could bring to the table and my experience and my personality. But I think, and that's taken me probably about 5 years, maybe more, to get comfortable within that, within the legal sphere. So as a junior member of the team, how do you start even tackling this?
Yeah, it's I get this question a lot actually, because it was a bit different for me because I always stood out. So I didn't even try to fit in, you know.
I love it.
That is the reality. And I was very fortunate. My dad was very strong in, you know, giving us that self-belief from a very early age on. I personally had a coach from the age of 18, you know, so I was always quite aware that being yourself is the biggest strength and biggest power you can have. I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not saying it was easy, because if you're different, you are perceived as being different. That's just inevitable. I think my best advice I can give is understanding what really is happening when we are in a situation like the one you just described. We give a presentation and we feel uncomfortable, right? So we turn, or, you know, we want to make, I don't know, ourselves fit in or look better, right? And then we start not being ourselves. The underlying emotion of that is fear, right? So I'm fearful. I'm fearful of being judged. I'm fearful of doing a mistake. And I'm fearful of, you know, never being a great lawyer. Let's face it. But that fear is irrational. It's an unmanaged or mismanaged representation of our own image, because we don't know if that's what they think. It's just what we start believing to think about ourselves that then starts limiting us to be really ourselves. So I think the number one step is, let's have a clean mindset. And you and me know this as coaches, we, you know, this is the first step. Have a clean mind, assess if your mental state in terms of your thoughts is healthy. As a trainee, you know, I think trainees should definitely start doing that. And then the second thing is, if it is healthy, am I letting other people's negative thoughts impact me, right? Because people always have something to say. And the earlier you start realizing that the only thing that matters is your own perception of yourself. I'm all for feedback, don't get me wrong, you know, feedback is super important, but there's a difference between feedback and judgment. And judgment can be negative and can impact you to move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it's so interesting, you know, that we're having this conversation just now, because it's, I think as a coach, you'll agree that you're always doing the work on yourself, aren't you? Yeah. And something I've been doing a lot on over the last couple of months is kind of my own limiting beliefs and what I'm capable of achieving. And one thing that keeps coming up is actually, if I ever speak to people about this, their perception of me versus my perception of myself and what I assume their perception of me is so fundamentally different that if I could just take their perception of me and run with that, I could actually take over the world. And that's what I'm trying to do, like become more aware of other people's perception of me for the positives versus just looking at the bits that I'm not good enough at yet. You know, I think that's something that is stemmed probably, you know, from early childhood, but especially when I was in the legal sector, of looking at how to be perfect, you know, this strong perfectionist mindset, and only focusing on what people might perceive as not being perfect about me, versus looking at the skills that I was really bringing to the table. And I think that's a really important lesson, to regularly check in with yourself as a junior member of the team and think, okay, I'm not perfect in this area, but where's my progress?
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love that. You know, that self-reflection is so important, because I think if we're completely honest, we also need to be careful of the definition of success within the legal sector, right? Or being successful, or making it, right? Because I had a huge, I found it very challenging that, for example, someone who had a very strong posh accent was considered, you know, automatically more capable. I did 100% come across that, you know, and me with my mixed German, Nigerian, you know, international accent, sometimes I do say a word wrong. I had a lot of fear around, oh, will I still be perceived as a good lawyer and a successful, you know, lawyer? And it limited me so much in my first year of training, or my second year even, until to the point where I just had to ask myself, is this really my definition of success?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. That's unbelievable to start thinking that, right? And whoever thinks that, I don't agree with. Right? So it's really starting to, and again, this is now really talking about the legal sector and industry. What have we labeled as, oh, this is a successful, good lawyer, when actually, you know, we have unintentionally maybe discriminated against people who have an accent, or, you know, again, who look differently, who don't look like the suited up persona that, you know, we might want to see in suits. Right?
Yeah, that's so fascinating as well. And would you agree that since the start of the pandemic, it feels like there's been quite an energy shift towards that? Because I think the definition of success before was, you know, the badge of honor of like not getting any sleep and working really long hours and having this cut suit and whatever else. And then those people we started seeing insight into their life. We saw, you know, their child or their pet budgie or whatever else they had, or, you know, the state of their bedroom behind them when they were, you know, on a call last minute. And I think that's kind of broken down the barriers a little bit for us to actually have more open conversations around about things like mental health and success and, you know, just what matters as well. And I think the tables are turning a little bit. Would you agree with that?
100%. We've seen humanity entering the legal or corporate world, right? With, you know, just like you mentioned, I was on a call once, and this was with a partner and then a CEO, and it was a huge deal or transaction. And then this little girl and her mom, you know, jumped through the background, and you know what, it made this person so human, and it made the whole situation loosen up and breaking up. And I think before that, we just go into the conference room, everyone is suited up, and there's that general energy around, we have to be serious, and this is the only way people will take us serious. Whereas now people are more ready to be vulnerable and ready to, you know, show vulnerability, which is huge. I mean, studies say that the most successful people are those that can show vulnerability. Right?
Oh, Brené Brown, have you watched her work?
I have a little bit.
Yeah, she's all about that, and it's really interesting. And I also think that's how we build connections as humans. So yes, as lawyers and, you know, professional people, we act a certain way, but also in order to form and, you know, to form these kind of bonded relationships where we trust each other, whether that's between supervisor and trainee, whether that's between, you know, partner and partner, or client and associate, we have to kind of, you know, show that vulnerability, show that personable human side. And that's when we start to actually kind of grow together and bond together in a different way. So I think, you know, some of the best connections and relationships I have, both personally and professionally, have came from a place of, you know, asking for a little bit of help or showing a little bit of vulnerability. And then those have just kind of allowed the other person to do the same.
Yeah. And that is something that I'm hoping to see more also in the junior end of law firms, you know, that actually, and I think we have seen that. I remember when I was training, you know, there was a huge emphasis on, you know, definitely ask for help. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. I'm not sure if it always was the right thing to do, you know, yeah, exactly. Sometimes.
No, wasn't my, well, I wouldn't say it wasn't my experience. That's wrong to say. It felt like it was said, but it didn't feel like it was really done. Or from a personal point of view, it wasn't necessarily, you know, reflective of all people. And actually, interestingly, because I work so closely with trainees and also speak to so many people on the podcast, the one thing that keeps coming back from more senior members of the team is that they absolutely love when people ask for a little bit of support or help, because it helps them guide people and it makes them feel better about themselves that they can support you. So it was almost like this expectation I had on myself, and I see many people having on themselves as well, that they have to know it all, they have to do it on their own, they have to struggle through and find the solution. But actually, if they just asked, you're actually giving someone else kind of a gift that they're able to help you and they're able to support you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do wonder where that disconnect comes from, because there seems to be a disconnect, because I was an associate, you know, I loved helping trainees, and I know my colleagues did so as well, but there was always this fear on the trainee side. Oh, I don't know if I should ask. And I mean, we really do have to ask, where does the disconnect come from? And I think it's, again, the general feeling of, what is it? It's that feeling of, it's not professional, right? There's especially in the legal industry, there are so many unspoken rules that we make up in our head, that we've heard, or, you know, stories we've heard. Oh, then someone asked and then they all spoke about it in the partners meeting. That probably never would happen, but it's those unspoken rules that we make up in our head. And I think it's so brilliant what you do, Claire, with, you know, bringing people on the podcast and really saying how it really is, you know, eliminating those wrong imaginations, you know, for trainees, and saying, no, absolutely ask, you know, in reason, but yes, go for it.
I think people listen to this and they still go, oh, but I couldn't ask my supervisor. And I think it's funny. I personally think it comes from the fact that, you know, people entering the legal profession, like, it's not easy to get a training contract, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So you have to be very driven, very, you know, very ambitious to be able to enter the sector. And I think part of that also comes off in a strong kind of perfectionist streak. So we have been very used to being top of our class, being the people who have always known the answer and got it right. And then when you then put yourselves into you know, a group of people like us, it's like, what's just happened now? But also, like, I was always the one that knew or would normally get it right. So I think that then kind of triggers that kind of imposter syndrome and doubting ourselves and not believing in ourselves because it feels different. But also, I think, you know, the expectations on ourselves to, I need to continue to be top of the class. I don't know, that always kind of, for me, feels like maybe where this unwillingness to ask for help is, when really it's backwards. Because like you said earlier, through feedback, through making mistakes, through, you know, tackling things we've never done before, that's how we learn and grow and develop. So why would we be expected to know? We've never done it before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I just want to take a second also, just, you know, for the perfectionists who listen, I think it's very important to note that being a perfectionist is an amazing blessing, right? You are the kind of person who, you know, will figure out how to, you know, draft a document in the most excellent and fantastic way. But being a perfectionist can also really, really, really hinder you. And I've seen this, especially in the associate years. The further up you go, the more able you need to be adaptable and flexible and take opportunity and take risk. And we don't speak about it enough, but we have a lot of perfectionists well, I've coached a lot of trainees who are struggling with this ability to let go a product or let go even of themselves and put themselves forward for presentations, put themselves forward for, you know, promotions, for putting themselves on different cases. And I always say you need to get a hold of your perfectionist trait. You know, it's not a bad thing, but you need to be able to manage it and push yours, because what happens is perfectionists really find it difficult to push themselves out of the comfort zone. right? And the issue with that is we only grow outside of our comfort zone. That's our state of growth. So I found, and this is very interesting, I'd like to know what you think. I found that trainees who are less perfectionist are actually those that go quicker further, right? Yeah. And that's the whole point of book smart will not bring you very far. Yeah. Even in the legal profession where people think that will bring you very far. I don't believe that anymore. I've seen it very differently.
Yeah, I would actually really agree with you there, saying that, I mean, I couldn't say kind of any studies or any kind of evidence, but more the people who are, you know, more forthcoming. And even if I think about my intake as well, in terms of who has gone to where and what's kind of happened, I would agree with you that I think being able to deal with the fact that things aren't always going to be 100% perfect, and being able to deal with the mistakes that you make.
Yeah.
We are gonna you know, make mistakes, whether you know, no matter how hard we try, but it is about what you can then take from those mistakes and how you kind of move forward. And like you said, I think it's the people who are, I wouldn't say it's risk averse, because I think everyone within the legal sector is pretty risk averse, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, being able to kind of look at yourself and be like, oh, well, that didn't work. How do I, you know, who can I ask for help? How can I move forward? And it's definitely something I've realized over the last few years, that when I do push myself further than I want to, and it makes me feel really uncomfortable, and I'm like, oh my God, I just want to like go back to the bit that I know I'm really good at, it's then that the biggest moments of growth and success, in my definition of success and what that means to me, that's when that starts to happen.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think this is also where mental health comes in as well, right? If we obsess about a failure, if we obsess about our inability to, you know, let go, right? That can really trigger mental health, and that can trigger stress. And it's something that I think is very, actually, I wouldn't even say just at the career starter level, it's at any level. I've seen it at associate level, etc. And the earlier you learn it, the better. The earlier you can learn that actually what you just said, you know, okay, I made a mistake, it wasn't good. Let me write down 2-3 points that I want to, you know, do better next time. But then I'm making it, it's a decision. I'm making a decision to let go. You know, people always ask me, but I can't let it go. It's haunting me during the night. And I just ask themselves, then you haven't made a decision. You need to make a decision within your head, and then your heart and emotions will follow. Yeah, you have to walk through the emotions. It might take a few, you know, hours, not days, hours.
Sometimes days, depends how big the mistake was.
Yeah, okay, true, yeah. But it has to start with that decision, and it will help you so much from a mental health perspective as well, which is so important. It's so important in this, you know, high pressure industry.
Yeah, definitely. I honestly couldn't agree more with everything that you're kind of saying. And it's interesting that a lot of the things you're saying are really relevant to me and where I'm at in my life now, because it's things I've been working on for, you know, however many years, kind of work through and move past. So yeah. And I think as well, like tying into one thing we speak about a lot on the podcast is that kind of growth mindset. And being able to foster a growth mindset, and instead of just focus on what do I get right, focus on what can I learn. Because I do think, you know, for many of us, we've probably got 95% of our lives is going really well. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but oh my God, I love that 5% that's not going right, especially at 4 o'clock in the morning. I just get up and think about it. And it's like, really, is that what you're going to think about just now? And again, I think that is tied into being quite driven and quite ambitious, that you look at what's not right so you can progress and so you can move forward. And an element of that is phenomenal, because then it gives us structure and it gives us goals and it gives us drive to where we want to, you know, where we want to go. But excessively worrying, like you said, that's when it starts to eat you up. And that's when you do start to suffer from things like anxiety, depression, you know, panic disorder, all of these things. And this is stuff I've faced in my life as well, from not dealing or not focusing my energy on the right things, and having these kind of negative thought loops over and over again, which are not helpful to me progressing my life and my career.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think we can all relate with that. You know, we as humans, I don't know what it is, but it's funny. I once listened to this podcast which said we are drawn to negativity, right? We are drawn to the drama. It's just how, I don't know, there's something in our DNA. I guess,
Biologically programmed, actually,
yeah.
to be that
And if
way.
you think about it,
For fear, yeah.
It makes sense because, you know, as cavemen and women, we had to, you know, figure it out. And there was that anxiety as such that drove us, you know, to build that hut, to get food, to hunt, etc. So, but now when we walk into our day to day, we have to ask ourselves, am I still, if I'm facing anxiety, am I still struggling to survive? No, 95% not the case. So let's think of the 5% that can be challenging. And yeah, I think it is really, you know, it's you have to overwrite it. That's what I always say. It's an intentional leaning forward process. It wouldn't just happen. You know, we're not just going to wake up day after day and then at some point everything will fall into place. No, it's an intentional, step-by-step affirmation, speaking good about yourself, being grateful for what we have, you know, and realizing that actually things are really good. Things are okay. And there might be people listening who think, no, Vanessa, you have no idea. Things aren't good for me, right? I don't have a training contract, or I'm in a training contract. I haven't ever spoken to my supervisor because of the pandemic, you know, and that's fine. And I accept that. But you need to be careful that you don't get sucked into that negativity, because it will not serve you.
Yeah.
It's harsh.
That kind of victim mode, isn't it? Where it's good to acknowledge what is not ideal, and then it's like use that as a pivot point as to, okay, how do I, despite this kind of thing which is, you know, holding me back, how do I then, because then when you do manage to achieve it, you've overcame that as well, so you are then stronger and more powerful than you ever even realized, you know.
No, definitely. And it's
that's when you get your badge of honor as to what you overcame. You know, I entered the legal profession and started working remotely. Despite that, I was still offered a seat, or despite that, I still got positive feedback. That's how I think you use it and you push it, versus, God, this is not as good as had I been in the office. Because the reality is, this is what we found ourselves in. We have to, you know, deal, I suppose.
Absolutely. And the underlying, how do I put this? The underlying tool that will actually give you that personal fulfillment will be choice. I am making a choice to be here, right? We as humans, you will find, I found myself the most unhappy when I felt that my whole life was taken away from me. I couldn't even, you know, go on the weekend and meet friends, you know. That's when I felt the least fulfilled and least happy. Why? Because I didn't have that internal, most natural thing of humanity, which is our choice to conduct our life, right? So if you are a trainee who finds themselves in, you know, in a pandemic, you know, etc., don't float. I always say, don't float with the emotion. Don't just say, oh, I'm just here, I'm just gonna, you know, float along. Take a choice every day and say, I am here because of my own choice. You are the one who applied, right? I'm here because of my own choice, and I'm gonna wake up and deal with today, right? But I'm taking the control back. It's so important, because in this pandemic, the pandemic will start controlling us. You know, the emotions will start controlling us. The training contract might start controlling you. But that is very dangerous, because you can move into a state of losing yourself completely, right? And just taking that mindset, that switch in your mindset to say, actually, I'm taking the control back. I'll still be in the same place, still be doing the same things, but I am deciding to do that. It's a huge mindset shift, and will make all the difference. That's what I have found.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think often, you know, when we speak about things like gratitude, or, you know, being intentional with our thoughts, all of this stuff, it can feel really like fluffy and a bit like, oh yeah, well, I don't have time for that, or isn't that lovely that you can do that, and it doesn't make a difference. But I can actually vouch that this year, since the start of this year, I have been meditating every morning and meditating every night before I go to bed, which, as a Scottish ex-litigator, is something I was very skeptical of for many, many years, even though, you know, I know the science, I know the benefits. But the way that I feel, like, I'm just so energized. And even when, you know, it's like, oh, okay, it looks like we're going to be locked down even further, I'm like, that's fine, like, whatever. Ideally, I'd like to go and see my friends more. Like, I haven't seen my family for a year and a half. I would love to go and see them. I know. But it's like, well, is what it is. It gives me more time to focus on the business or to speak to people on the podcast, whatever it can be. And I know that sounds like, oh, isn't that lovely that you've managed to pick up on that positive thing? But I do think that by actually doing these exercises, by doing these practices, you completely change the way that you feel on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that is what leads you to be really successful, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And I'm happy with, 20% never understanding that. Because you and me, I think we find ourselves in situations where we because we've experienced the power of speaking positively, we've experienced the power of reflecting. I self-coach every morning. In the morning I journal, I put it down. I couldn't agree more with you, Claire, right? I've experienced the power of taking choice back, control back within my training, within my associate years, and for me it worked fantastically, right? When I wanted to leave, I had chats around, how can you stay, Vanessa? We want you to stay, right? So it works for me. It works for you, but there will be always people who just don't believe it. And that is okay. I'm focusing on the people that just need to hear this, and then they will start incorporating that. I think I've had to learn to accept that some people will start thinking, still keep thinking, oh, it's just talk, it's not really.
That's fine for you, but it wouldn't work for me.
Exactly.
And also, do you find as well that sometimes, despite knowing all of this, it's still like, sometimes I don't do it. Sometimes, despite knowing, like, hold on, the way that you're perceiving this situation is not right. And I let all the negative emotions come up, and it's not, Claire, you can turn this around, you can change this. But sometimes I think it's not about always feeling happy. Sometimes you have to feel those negative emotions, but being able to kind of watch them pass and then go, okay, I know that after this, I'm going to be okay, or, that. And I think that's been something that I struggled to deal with, because I would be like, well, I know this. Well, why am I still experiencing this negative emotion? Like, I should be able to pick to feel happy all the time, because I know my thoughts control my emotions.
Yeah, no, 100%. I give myself a rant day once in a while, or just like a whining day. 100%. It's like, I always have this mental image, you ride your bike and then you just fall and then just lay flat on the ground. I'm not getting up that ground for a while. Sometimes you just need to lay there and just think to yourself, everything is just so horrible and so hard. And hello, we're all humans. We're all humans. You and me don't have different emotions only because we have these tools or these techniques, I guess, but we know how to manage them. So this is the whole image, right? I lay on that ground, I whine and I cry and I don't even care. But at some point I'll get back on that bike, and it comes naturally because we've been doing it, right? It comes naturally. And I think that's all that matters, is just the idea of, once you know how to do it, of course you still face the same emotions. Of course you still feel horrible once in a while, but it will be easier for you to get back on and back out, actually.
Yeah, I love this. I could actually speak to you for the next 3 hours. I've got a feeling that we're going to stop the podcast and then carry on.
I know, it's just so great.
Yeah, it's so nice to speak to someone who's on the same, yes, super excited. And so I normally, unfortunately, will have to finish down the podcast just now, but I always finish with 3 questions. The first thing I would love to know is, what does resilience mean to you?
Okay, resilience. Let me think about that for a second. I think for me personally, resilience means, number one, actually knowing. Okay, let me rephrase. For me, resilience means that I am in alignment with where I'm supposed to go, but I also know when I'm not. So taking a step back and saying, am I still on where I'm supposed to go? Am I pursuing my vision? Am I pursuing my dream? That for me means resilience. And if not, taking a step back and taking a different route and then pursuing that is super important. It's not just the, going for it and determination. It's actually being in alignment with where you're supposed to go. And if not, that's the important thing. If not, taking a step back and taking a turn to go on that.
Yeah, and having the kind of almost the confidence in yourself to not see it as a waste of time, because if nothing else, what that misstep or that kind of direction has shown you is that wasn't actually what you wanted to do. So it's useful, right? Because I think, I don't know about you, but sometimes I actually learn more about myself when I realize what I'm not good at or what I don't like or where I don't want to go.
Definitely.
Versus like it's very difficult to be like, what's your favorite food, you know, whereas what do you not like, I can give you like 20. So I think sometimes that's really useful. Thank you for sharing that. And the other thing I would love to know is, what is your number one tip for sustainable success in the legal sector?
Sustainable success, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on it. It goes back to that, you know, what we discussed about perfectionism, etc. You know, just let some things go. Reflect, take feedback on, but then move on, move forward. You know, that leaning forward approach. I think that will bring you get you very, very far in life and in your career.
Yeah, amazing. And the final thing I'd love to know is, who inspires you within the legal sector?
Within the legal sector? Wow, that is an interesting question. I don't think I ever had someone who's necessarily inspired me. Maybe it actually goes back to, you know, what we discussed about actually not having that many people who look like me within the legal sector. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be Michelle Obama, because she, of course, you know, she was a lawyer at Sidley Austin, and then went into nonprofit. And again, it's actually what we discussed, you know, that taking a step back and saying, okay, am I in alignment with where I'm supposed to go? And she did that. She really was able to, despite, you know, this amazing work and money that she was making, to then say, no, but this is not what I feel my heart's or my calling is what I'm called to be doing. That makes sense. Yeah, so I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be her. I love her.
Good one. I've never had her actually before. No one said that, so I will take that as a very good person. Thank you so much. This conversation's been absolutely phenomenal. I've loved every second of it. I'm sure everyone as well has. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, I loved it. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing. It is amazing. We need more Claires in this life, in this legal.
One of a kind. We spoke about this.
It is true.
There you go.
No, I love it. And I'm so grateful for your work.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Maybe I'll go a bit hot and flustered. So to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today. And I really would encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. It's Leading Minds, where you are given daily tips for sustainable success within the legal sector. And also you'll receive the bi-weekly podcast there. And also, if you'd like to subscribe on our website at leadingmindsglobal.com/podcast, you'll see the backlog of all of our podcasts. I think this is episode 30 actually. So thank you for joining me on that special occasion. But also, if you would like to subscribe, you'll get the weekly, the bi-weekly podcast straight to your inbox. So thank you so much.
Bye.